Hey there. I had someone asking me about these the other day, about the little loops of paracord that I add to some of my items. You may call it a lanyard or retention loop or key fob, or I don't know what you want to call it. I'm not sure if lanyard is the correct term, but for the sake of this video, I'll just call it a lanyard. It's just easier for me to say that, even though it's probably not right. But I have a lot of these on my different little pocket items, and if you've watched any number of my videos, I'm sure you've seen these before numerous times. They're basically a short length of 550 paracord that has the inner strands removed. You can see on this one it's been squished flat in my pocket many times, so you can see that obviously the guts of the paracord have been taken out. It's been melted together to form one ring, and then I've slid one of these small beads somewhere along the length of it to kind of separate it into two pieces. So there's nothing really special to it. I've seen some similar stuff. People don't tend to do this exact configuration that I've seen. I think it's just because it's a little too basic for most people. I know people like the box knots or the hangman's noose kind of loop that's on a lot of stuff, and those are cool. For a lot of my stuff, I wanted something smaller, flatter, thinner, as is usually the case with my EDC items. Kind of picky about stuff like that, so I thought I would make a quick video, even though it's a lot of you could probably tell, from my explanation how this works. I did want to kind of go through the steps real quick and show you how to make one, just in case, and to kind of clarify some stuff, because the beads that I use on here are quite small, and it might give some people pause or a little bit of confusion when they go to add it to the paracord. And the beads themselves, I think these are typically, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think these are typically referred to as pony brand beads or pony beads. They're 6 by 9 millimeters, and they have the little inner portion is, the inner diameter is 3 millimeters, which is fine if you're putting one piece of paracord straight through on its own, but once you gut it and double it over, it can be very snug, which is nice because you want a lot of tension. You can, so it doesn't slip off, and also so you can slide it to the desired position. You can actually put several beads. I had some of these that had 3 or 4 beads on it, and they look kind of cool. It's just something a little bit different that you could do. But it is pretty snug when you go to feed the paracord through and it's doubled over. So I wanted to make a video showing that. So I don't think I'm going to be able to make this all in one continuous shot. I think I'll just stitch some stuff together. But that's the basic lanyard or loop or whatever you want to call that, and then I thought I'd show you the materials that I use real quick to make one. So first of all, you're going to need some paracord, 550, 7 strand. Obviously color doesn't matter. I will mention, I would like to make a note that certain brands and certain colors are of different thickness. So this pink stuff right here, I believe this is Rothko, and it's thick, but it's not as thick as and I'm forgetting, I think it's, the brand name's escaping me on this one. This one is a really popular brand. They have a lot of the fancier color patterns. Their stuff is awful thick, and so the thicker it is, the harder it's going to be when you go to insert it through the bead. And so like I have some, the mil-spec olive drab green, and I have some black paracord, and those feel really thin and they go through really easily. Some of these pattern ones are a little bit more difficult. So it's not really going to make too much of a difference, but just something to note that some paracord will go through easier than others, so don't freak out if you're having more trouble feeding it through the bead. So you want your paracord. You'll need at least one of these beads. If I looked on eBay, and you can actually buy pony beads in all sorts of different colors, glow in the dark. These happen to be UV, which means if you take them out in the sun, they'll change color. And they have those in orange, pink, blue, and they're actually really cool. They're white, or they look kind of like that jade or glow in the dark sort of basic tone. They're sort of like a natural color until you go at least under a black light or some sort of UV light, and then they glow, not quite intense, but they definitely change color, and they're pretty obvious. So I think these are all blue. So if I were to go take these outside and hold them under the sun, they'll turn sort of like a pastel dark kind of blue. So they're neat. But they're not very expensive. You can typically get pony beads online, like on eBay, like 100 of them for like $4. They might run you as much as $6 with shipping included, depending on if you want glow in the dark or UV or standard, and they come in, you know, you can get a ton in just one solid color. So whatever you like, they're nothing special. So you'll need one of those. Obviously you'll need the item that you're going to attach your lanyard or your loop to. And even though I am a knife guy, I do use scissors for my paracord. These are some little Fiskars, and they're really sharp, and they just make a really precise cut through the paracord so that I don't get a lot of fraying, because you are going to be removing the inside and then cutting it and melting the ends. And then, of course, that would lead us to our lighter. You will need a lighter or an aim and flame or a candle or whatever fire source you would like. You know, use your stove, or you could probably even heat the ends of the paracord with a soldering iron if you don't have a lighter handy. You just need something, you know, hot enough to melt the paracord so that you can connect the two ends together. So that's all the basic materials that you'll need, and then I'll stop here and I'll cut to the next segment and I'll show you, you know, just getting it measured out and everything. So I'll be right back. Oops, I left out one other thing you're going to need, and that is something to force the paracord through the bead. So this is just a cheap little set of screwdrivers. I picked this up for like $3 at Harbor Freight. I use the small little hex drivers that come in this set, and I use one of the smaller diameter, the middle diameter ones. This says it's 2 millimeters. I think sometimes I might even use the 1.5 depending on how thick the paracord is. I'll use that to push the paracord through the bead. So you will need something. You could probably use a Phillips screwdriver, although the end of it being pointed, and also on a flathead driver, the end being, you know, sort of being like a blade, being a little bit pointed, you might cut or abrade the paracord. So you might try and find something small of a similar diameter to this, you know, just I don't know what it would be, maybe a small little piece of wood or something that you could kind of blunt the end. You just need something to kind of, you know, push the paracord through the bead. So you'll need to secure something for yourself that will work, and I have just happened to find that this little driver works best, just from what I've tried so far. So sorry for leaving that part out. But anyway, so we've got our paracord, and we need a certain length of it. And as far as how long it is, that's just all personal preference. The longer you make it, the more beads you can add to it if you want to do different colors along the length of it. You know, it's all personal preference. I happen to find most of mine are just about the size that goes around my wrist. So to measure, I'll just make a quick loop around my wrist, hold it there, cut it with the scissors, and then at this point, you know, cats are going wild in the other room. I promise they're not killing each other. This is their insane form of playing. Okay, so you're going to take out the guts, take out those 7 strands on the inside, so we're left with our hollow paracord straw. And then I've got one little frayed end, so I'm going to clean that up a little bit by cutting that off. So now we have just that short little loop, and this will be the main body of our lanyard, or like I said, whatever you want to call it. Okay, done with that stuff. Now at this point you have a couple options. You can just go put the bead on the end of the paracord right away. Get one out here. And you can just put it on the open end and then melt the other end later. And the reason that you might want to do that is if you're adding a keychain, or excuse me, a small key ring like the one here. Hold it up a little bit closer for you to see. There is a small key ring looped through the paracord, and what you can do is if you want to loop that through the paracord first before melting the ends of it, it might make it a little bit easier to get it on the key ring. The smaller the key ring, the tougher it can be to slide paracord onto it. So that's an option. For this particular video, I'll just, you know, I'll do it the quick and easy way. So let me grab this little guy that we were talking about before, and I'll show you the paracord. If I try and push it through just with my bare hands, it's not going to happen. I mean, if you were amazingly skilled, or if you had fingers like a tiny mouse or something, you might be able to force it through there, but for me that's just not going to work. And so what you'd want to do is take the paracord and kind of wrap it around the end of whatever instrument you've decided to use to push it through the bead. And do be careful at this part. See how I kind of got it wrapped around the end of the driver. You can see how if I put my finger at the end of the bead to push it through, if that driver comes through fast, I'm going to probably gouge my finger. So if you have some sort of a hard surface that you can do this against, you know, this sort of fashion and kind of smash it through, or if you set the driver against a surface and you push it through on the top, you know, something like that, that might be the safest course. You might also find that if you only push through one half of the edge, if you apply your driver to the edge of the paracord and push it through, I don't know if I can get that close enough. Yeah, you can kind of see that it's just on the edge. Sometimes get one edge started going through the bead, and then you can kind of retract the driver or whatever instrument you're using to push it through, reset it, and kind of push again. Let me find a harder surface and I'll kind of show you. I'm going to use it to kind of push down against it. So once again, I'll be right back. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. I just brought in a quick cutting board, little cheap plastic cutting board from the kitchen that I'll use to push against so that I don't gouge my table here. So I'll put that little driver with the paracord wrapped around it, set my bead down, and then I'll use that hard surface to push against to get my paracord started. And this pink stuff is thicker than I thought it would be. See how you could kind of hear me push through the paracord right now. And if that had been my hand or my finger on the other side, I would have been sad. So it takes a little bit of doing, a little bit of finagling, but the reward is that once you get this bead, or once you get the paracord threaded through the bead, the nice part is that you aren't going to have any problems with the bead slipping off. And in fact, I think I'm going to go to this smaller driver. This one's a 1.5 millimeter hex driver, or hex wrench, whatever you want to call it. So there I've kind of sat there and worked it back and forth, and get it up close so you can see it is now pushed through. Now, like I said, if you use something really pointy, you might end up tearing the end of the paracord that goes through. That probably still won't matter, because once you pull it through the other side, you can kind of smooth out where it's frayed. I've had it happen to a couple of them, and it's not really a big deal. So I've got it pushed through, and now I can just use my fingers to pull it the rest of the way. Sorry if I'm blocking the view. Just use my fingers to pull it the rest of the way through. So as you can see, we've got the end that originally had the little hex wrench pushing through. The bead is now threaded onto the paracord, and now we are only left with the task of melting the ends of the paracord. And this part is probably pretty self-explanatory. I've roughed it up a little bit, so I'm going to smooth out the ends here. I kind of frayed them a little bit. And that's another reason how I was saying you might want to melt it beforehand. So there's a good reason to melt it beforehand, so that you're not, while you're sitting there working the paracord through the bead, you're not fraying the cord. So there's our two ends. Not perfect, but this was just supposed to be a quick explanation. Your lighter or whatever other heat source you have, you're going to heat both ends at the same time. And this part could be kind of touchy as far as making sure you don't melt them together too much or getting them melted together nicely. You do want the ends to be melted together fairly well. You don't want them, you want a full connection or fuse between the two sides, because you don't want this to come apart. And while I'm mentioning that, I will say, if you were to attach this to an item now, so we're done, this is the whole thing, and I might have been a little bit more careful in the future. If I was going to make another one, I'd probably spend a little bit more time being careful about where I fuse the two ends, so it looks a little rough. But your choices are that you can either make the fused end where your item goes, or the other end. And the reason I recommend the other end is because if you use the fused end to put your, if you put your Leatherman or whatever on the end with the melted part and it breaks in some way, for some weird reason, you might lose the item. You might lose what you were carrying. Probably not, because it'll be in your pocket, but just, in the off chance, you might use the opposite end. It doesn't really matter, but just real quick, I'll put it on this Swiss Tech, what is this, the Micro Pro. So we have our two ends melted. Loop it through whatever you want it added to, slide the end down, and that little sliding thing is kind of nice, because if you use a long piece of cord, you can actually put the whole thing around your wrist and then use the bead to kind of choke up and tighten it against your wrist like you would like a camera lanyard, something of that nature. So you just tighten it down as much as you like it, and that is pretty much the unofficial It's a Wonderful Knife lanyard loop thing. So there you have it. That's how you make one of these little beaded loops, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you get some use out of this. Maybe if you don't make this exact kind of lanyard, maybe it'll give you some tips on coming up with your own ideas for adding one of these little loops, lanyards, whatever you call them, to your items. So that's it. Thanks very much for watching as always, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.